영어 동화 세상 리틀팍스.
Black Chapter 1 My First Home. What is it like to be a horse? I can tell you because I've been one all my life. And what a life it has been. The first thing I remember is the field where I was born. It had plenty of grass, a pond, and trees for shade. There was a shed at one end where we could stand when it was cold. Outside the fence lay more fields, a stream, and our master's house. My mother's name was Duchess, and she was a favorite of the master because of her sweet nature. Whenever she saw him, she would neigh and trot over to greet him. There were other mares and foals in the field as well. I ran and played with the other males. These colts were all older and bigger than me. Sometimes their play turned rough, with lots of kicking and biting. One day my mother called me away from them.
I hope you will grow up gentle and kind,
She told me.
I do not want you to bite or kick, even in play. You should always be good and do your work as well as you can.
I never forgot this advice from my mother. Our master's name was Farmer Gray. He always had kind words and pats for all the horses. He was kind and fair to his workers as well. One of those workers was a boy named Dick. Sometimes, after Dick finished his work, he came into our field to pick berries. And sometimes that wasn't the only thing he did.
Hey, you!
He yelled at us one day. I was grazing nearby with the other colts. We all looked up at the sound of his voice. One of the bigger colts took a step toward him. I could tell the colt was hoping for a treat like the ones Farmer Gray often brought us.
Go on!
Dick shouted.
I want to see you run!
Then he threw a stick at the big colt. It hit him hard on the chest. The colt was so surprised that he snorted, whirled around, and kicked up his heels. Then he galloped off toward the mares, who were grazing at the other end of the field. That made the rest of us run too. Behind us, I heard Dick laughing loudly. After that, Dick often hurled sticks and stones at us to make us run. Once we understood his game, we stayed far enough away so he couldn't hit us. But once in a while, a stone would hit me, and it hurt. None of us liked that boy very much. One day, Dick began his game as usual. But he didn't know that Farmer Gray was in the next field. When our master saw what was going on, he rushed over and grabbed Dick by the arm.
Bad boy!
He scolded Dick sternly.
I can tell this is not the first time you've chased the colts. But it will be the last time. You're fired!
That was the last time we saw Dick. Other than Dick's visits, most of our days were quiet and pleasant. Yet there was one other incident that I have never forgotten. I was grazing in the field with the other colts. We all looked up when we heard dogs howling in the distance. The oldest colt pricked his ears and listened.
Those are the hounds,
he said, cantering over to the fence. The rest of us followed. What's happening? I asked my mother, who stood there looking out.
It's the hunt.
She told me.
Humans sometimes chase rabbits and foxes on horseback. The hounds help them follow the trail.
We all watched as the hunters came into sight. The hounds came first, racing after a speedy rabbit. Next came a group of riders. The rabbit scampered down the hill and leaped across the stream. The hounds followed. Most of the horses jumped the stream easily, but one slipped on the grass and fell down. His rider, a handsome young man, was flung off. He landed hard and lay still on the grass. The others returned to check on him, but he never got up, and finally they carried him away. Later we heard that the fallen rider was George Gordon. He was the only son of Squire Gordon, the richest man in the area. George had broken his neck and died in the fall. When my mother heard the news, she looked sad.
I don't understand why people are so interested in hunting.
She said,
Then again, we're only horses. Who expects us to understand the ways of humans?
I didn't know the answer to that. But soon I would learn more about the mysterious ways of humans when I left that pleasant field behind forever. Black Beauty, Chapter 2, Being Trained. I was almost 4 years old when Farmer Gray brought another man to see me. It was Squire Gordon.
What a fine-looking horse.
The squire said, gazing at me. Indeed, I was growing up to be very handsome. I was jet black except for one white hoof and a white star on my forehead.
I'll start training him soon,
Farmer Gray said.
I like to let horses grow up before I ride them. Boys should not work like men.
Squire Gordon chuckled and then looked into my eyes. He gently opened my mouth to examine my teeth and ran his hands up and down my legs.
May I see how he moves?
He asked.
Of course,
Farmer Gray replied. I walked, trotted, and cantered while the two men watched. When I finished, the squire looked pleased.
Please call me when he's trained.
He said,
This horse is exactly what I'm looking for.
The next day, I began my training. I already knew how to do lots of things. I could wear a halter and walk calmly beside a human. I could pick up my feet nicely so my hooves could be trimmed. But now I found there was much more to learn. First came the bridle, which looked a little like a halter. But there was one big difference, the bit. That was a piece of metal attached to the leather straps. Imagine my surprise when Farmer Gray put the bit into my mouth. I tried to spit it right back out. But Farmer Gray used kind words and some grain to convince me not to do so. Still, having the bit in my mouth was a very strange feeling. I did not like it at all. Next, Farmer Gray sat a saddle gently on my back. There was a strap that he fastened under my body to hold the saddle in place. I didn't mind that too much, especially when he gave me more grain. After that, Farmer Gray saddled and bridled me every day and led me around. He also gave me extra grain, along with lots of pats and kind words. Before long, I looked forward to my training sessions. Then one day, Farmer Gray lifted himself into the saddle and sat on my back. It felt strange, but I could hear his voice talking to me from up there, so I wasn't afraid. Soon, Farmer Gray was riding me around the farm every day. Then he brought out a driving harness. My mother and the other adult horses wore this harness whenever they were hooked to a cart or carriage. The harness had a stiff, heavy collar and a bridle with 2 squares of leather, called blinkers, attached to it. With the blinkers on, I could see straight ahead, but not to the sides. More harness pieces crossed my body, and a stiff strap went under my tail. The tail strap was called a crupper, and I liked it even less than the bit. The first time Farmer Gray put the crupper on me, I felt like kicking. But my mother had taught me well, and I kept my feet on the ground. I almost forgot to mention one more part of my training. My master sent me to a nearby farm for a couple of weeks. I was put out in a field with some sheep and cows. There was plenty of delicious grass, so I started to eat. Then I heard a roar in the distance. Seconds later, a huge, noisy black monster rushed into view. It terrified me so much that I galloped to the far end of the field. To my surprise, though, the sheep and cows didn't react at all. I soon found out that the monster was called a train, and I learned why none of the other animals seemed to notice the noise. Trains raced past that field several times every day. At first, I ran away each time. Then I stopped running and just lifted my head to watch. Finally, I got used to the trains, just as I'd grown used to the bit, the saddle, the harness, and even the crupper. I returned home, and Farmer Gray started hooking me to a cart and driving me around the neighborhood. He usually hitched my mother beside me. She was a good, calm horse who helped to teach me what to do.
You're learning fast, my son.
She told me.
I'm glad because the better you behave, the better humans will treat you.
What do you mean? I asked her. Farmer Gray always treats all the horses well.
Yes,
She agreed.
but other humans aren't always as kind as our master.
I wasn't sure why I should worry about what other humans were like. But later I would find out more about that. Black Beauty, Chapter 3, New Friends and a New Name. One morning after breakfast, a young man came into the stable with Farmer Gray.
Here he is.
My master said, stopping in front of my stall. The stranger peered in at me.
What a handsome horse! I'm not surprised the squire chose him.
Yes, I'm sure he'll enjoy this horse.
Farmer Gray said.
I will certainly miss him when he goes.
The farmer led me out and gave me a pat. I didn't understand what was going on or why his eyes looked sad, but I put my nose into his hand to try to make him feel better.
Goodbye, boy.
My master said.
Be a good horse and always do your best.
Then he handed my lead rope to the other man. The stranger and I walked out through the farm gates. My mother and some of the other horses neighed to me from the pasture. Soon we turned in through another gate, and I saw a fine estate. This was my new home, Birtwick Park. The man leading me was James, the head groom. He put me into a large, airy stall and gave me a handful of grain.
There you go.
He said kindly.
I'd better go tell the squire you're here.
There were 4 stalls in this part of the stable, and mine was the largest. In a smaller stall stood a fat gray pony. He had a thick mane and tail, and a pretty head.
Hello,
I said.
what's your name?
I'm Merrylegs.
The pony said.
I am very handsome, so the young ladies love to ride me or drive me in a cart. Are you going to live next door to me now?
I think so.
I answered.
I hope you're a nice horse.
Merrylegs said.
I don't like living next door to anyone who bites.
He looked over at the stall on his other side. A chestnut mare with a long, graceful neck stood there.
So you're the one who took my stall.
She snapped.
How dare you put a lady out of her home?
Excuse me, but I did no such thing.
I said politely.
The man who brought me here put me in the stall. I truly had no choice in the matter.
Don't worry about her.
Merrylegs said quietly as the mare turned away.
Ginger knows it's her own fault she was moved out of that stall. She has a bad habit of biting, and the young ladies were becoming afraid to visit me.
They won't have to worry about me,
I said.
The only things I bite are grass, hay, and grain. Why does Ginger bite?
She says no one was ever nice to her before.
Merrylegs said.
John and James hope she'll be better tempered now that she's here.
The next day, John Manley led me out of my stall. John was the head coachman. James and the other stable hands worked for him. John had kind eyes and a calm manner. He groomed me from head to hoof, making my dark coat gleam. He was almost finished when the squire arrived.
Hello, John.
The squire said.
I wanted to try out my new horse this morning, but I'm too busy. Would you ride him for me and let me know how he goes?
Of course, sir.
John said. He brought out a saddle along with a bridle. When he set the saddle on my back, it pinched my shoulders. Luckily, John immediately saw that it didn't fit. He took it away and brought out a different one. John was a very good rider, and I was happy to do exactly what he asked. We walked for a while, and then we trotted. Finally, he urged me into a fast gallop. We were riding back toward the stable when we passed the squire walking with his wife.
How was your ride, John?
The squire asked.
Very good, sir.
John answered, sounding pleased.
It's obvious the horse has been well treated and well trained.
Excellent.
The squire said.
I'll try him myself tomorrow.
The next day, the squire took his turn on me. He was a good rider, too, and we had a pleasant ride. When we passed the house, his wife came out.
How do you like him?
She asked.
I've never ridden a finer horse.
The squire replied.
Now all this fellow needs is a name.
Should we call him Blackbird like your uncle's old horse?
His wife asked. The squire shook his head.
He is handsomer than Blackbird ever was.
He really is a beauty.
His wife agreed.
We could call him Black Beauty.
Black Beauty.
The squire said thoughtfully.
I like it.
And so I had a new home and a new name.